When Tiger Woods walked into the courtroom that morning, no one expected what would happen next. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The judge, arrogant and dismissive, thought he could humiliate the golfing legend with a few sharp words. But what he didn't know was that Tiger Woods wasn't just there as a defendant. He was there to expose corruption in the very system that had tried to break him. What followed would not only change the judge's fate, but would become a powerful statement about justice, integrity, and how even the most respected figures can fall when they forget the meaning of fairness. The courtroom was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic tapping of Judge Harrington's gavel against the wood. Tiger Woods sat motionless, his back straight, his jaw set, as the judge's eyes locked onto him from across the bench. It wasn't the first time Tiger had faced adversity, but this time it felt different. The air was thick, charged with tension. The spectators in the gallery were on edge, each of them knowing that what happened here today could change everything. "Mr. Woods," Judge Harrington began, his voice low but piercing, "let's talk about your career. Or, should I say, what's left of it." The words hung in the air like a loaded gun, ready to fire. Tiger didn't flinch. He'd been in the spotlight his entire life, under scrutiny from both fans and critics, but this felt personal. The judge leaned forward, his fingers tapping against his desk. "You think the world still cares about Tiger Woods? You're nothing more than a fallen star, a relic of a time gone by." The words sliced through the silence, sharp and unforgiving. The courtroom was silent, save for the sound of Tiger's breathing. His face remained stoic. But inside, a storm was building. The tension was unbearable, and it felt like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. Tiger knew he needed to keep his composure, but the longer the judge continued, the more something inside him began to stir. Before we dive back into the story, I've got a quick favor to ask. I'm working toward a goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and every single one counts. It would mean the world if you'd hit that subscribe button. All right, back to the story. Judge Harrington's voice dripped with sarcasm as he leaned back in his chair. "Let's be honest here, Tiger. The public has long forgotten you. You were once the shining star of golf, but now you're just another headline of a broken man." His words were laced with contempt, every syllable designed to tear down what was left of Tiger's legacy. Tiger didn't react. His jaw remained tight, his eyes never leaving the judge. He had faced tougher battles, on and off the course, but something about this felt different. This wasn't just about golf. This was about who he was as a man. And Judge Harrington, in his arrogance, had just crossed a line. "You've had your fall from grace, Mr. Woods," the judge continued, the crowd's murmurs fading as they waited for his next words. "The public loved you, but that was a long time ago. What have you done lately, huh? Is it still just about the money? Or is there anything left to salvage?" Tiger's expression didn't change, but deep within him, something shifted. There was a flicker in his eyes, something the judge hadn't noticed, something fierce, something burning. For the first time, Tiger's calm facade seemed like it might crack. He had endured insults before, but this was personal, and Judge Harrington would soon learn that Tiger Woods wasn't someone to underestimate. Tiger's fingers tightened around the edges of his wristwatch, the only visible sign of his building frustration. His pulse quickened, but his expression remained as calm as ever. The weight of the judge's words, dripping with disdain, seemed to hang in the air like smoke, suffocating him. He had been through hell before, but there was something about this moment that made his chest feel tighter, the room closing in around him. The courtroom was silent, every eye on Tiger, waiting for his response. But he didn't speak. Instead, he stood tall, his back straight, his jaw set firmly. Every inch of his body screamed resolve, even as the judge's voice continued to cut through the tension. The judge smirked, watching Tiger's every move, hoping for some sign of weakness, some crack in the armor. But there was none. For a fleeting moment, Tiger's eyes flickered toward the gallery, meeting the gaze of a few spectators. The calmness in his face was almost impenetrable, but there was something in his eyes, something that suggested a storm was brewing beneath the surface. The moment hung there, suspended in time, and then the gavel slammed down. The sound reverberated through the room, but before anyone could react, something shifted in the air. The room was about to explode, but no one knew exactly what would happen next. Just as the courtroom was beginning to feel like it might erupt, the doors at the back of the room creaked open. Pam Bondi, the state attorney, stepped into the courtroom, her heels clicking against the floor. Her presence was immediately felt. There was an air of quiet authority around her, and her sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. She had been observing the proceedings from the back, her gaze locked on the tension between Tiger and Judge Harrington. The courtroom paused. It was as if time itself slowed down for a moment. Bondi's eyes, narrowed with suspicion, were fixed firmly on the judge. The air seemed to vibrate with anticipation, and the entire room could sense something was about to change. Without missing a beat, Pam Bondi walked straight toward the bench, her steps purposeful, each one louder than the next. The entire courtroom fell silent as she made her way past the spectators, her eyes locked on Judge Harrington. The moment her heels stopped, she didn't wait for permission. "Judge Harrington," she began, her voice steady but filled with authority, "you've been under investigation for your past dealings, corrupt decisions that have tainted your position." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, jolting everyone in the room. The gallery shifted uneasily, whispers starting to buzz, but Bondi wasn't done. She calmly demanded immediate action. The judge's face twitched, his usual smirk now replaced by something more dangerous. He leaned forward in his chair, eyes narrowing. The room was thick with tension as everyone waited, unsure of how this was going to play out. The very foundation of the courtroom had just shifted. Judge Harrington stared at Pam Bondi, his mouth opening slightly, his expression one of disbelief. How could she have known? What had she uncovered? The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the judge to strike back, to deny the allegations with his usual bravado. But instead, there was only a long, lingering silence. Could he talk his way out of this? Could he find a way to dismiss these claims? To preserve his power? The weight of his past crimes, now exposed, seemed to weigh him down, and for the first time he was unsure of his next move. The entire room was on edge. No one knew if the judge would simply deny everything, or if his own sins would finally catch up to him. His reputation, his power, everything was now at risk. What would happen next? Would he be forced to face the consequences of his actions, or would he try to maneuver out of this? Bondi had set the stage, and now it was up to the judge to respond. What was she doing here? Why had she waited so long to make her presence known? And most importantly, what was going to happen now that she had entered the fray? The tension thickened. The room held its collective breath. Bondi moved forward, her steps deliberate, and every person in the room wondered, was she here to calm the situation or escalate it further? What did she have planned for Judge Harrington? The moment was loaded with uncertainty, and the world seemed to pause as her gaze locked with Tiger's. Something told him that the real battle was only just beginning. Bondi's voice cut through the thick tension in the courtroom. "The arrest warrants have already been signed, Judge Harrington. You're done." The words echoed like a bombshell, sending shockwaves through the room. Before the judge could respond, the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. Police officers in full uniform stormed in, their presence immediate and commanding. The onlookers, who had been holding their breath, now gasped in unison as the officers moved toward the bench. Judge Harrington stood frozen for a moment, eyes wide, mouth slightly agape. His arrogance, once so absolute, faltered. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The police officers moved quickly, efficiently. With a firm grip, they placed him in handcuffs, his arms pinned behind him. The courtroom erupted into chaos. The spectators stood up, whispers and gasps flooding the air, some reaching for their phones to capture the moment. The once powerful judge, who had lorded over this room for so long, was now nothing more than another criminal being led away. As they dragged him out, a cold, bitter silence followed them. The gavel was still, unmoved, but the room was forever changed. And just like that, the power dynamics of the courtroom had shifted. Judge Harrington was no longer in control. The man who had insulted Tiger Woods now had no choice but to face his own reckoning. Tiger Woods sat in his seat, still as a statue, his face a picture of composure. He had witnessed many highs and lows in his life, triumphs, defeats, controversies. But today something different stirred within him. As the officers dragged Judge Harrington out of the courtroom in cuffs, Tiger's eyes followed the motion, his gaze sharp and unyielding. There was no visible sign of emotion, but something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or perhaps satisfaction. For the first time in this entire ordeal, Tiger felt the weight of justice shifting in his favor. The judge, who had tried so hard to tear him down, was now facing the consequences of his own actions. The room, still buzzing with shock and disbelief, faded into the background. Tiger's focus remained on the exit, watching the doors close behind the judge. It wasn't just about this moment, it was about the bigger picture, about fairness, about standing up when you've been knocked down too many times. Bondi approached him, her steps measured, purposeful. She offered a quiet nod, acknowledging the victory, and without saying a word, Tiger returned the gesture. There was no need for grand speeches or cheers. In this moment, their unspoken understanding said everything. Justice had been served. What will this mean for the future of the judiciary? As news of Judge Harrington's arrest spreads, the shockwaves reverberate far beyond the courtroom. Bondi's decisive action is hailed by many as a triumph of justice, a rare moment where the system righted itself. But beneath the surface, questions linger. How many others in positions of power have abused their authority in the same way? How deep does the corruption run? The story begins to unfold beyond this single courtroom with whispers of hidden agendas, shady deals, and questionable rulings in courtrooms across the country. Legal professionals, reporters, and citizens alike begin to ask, who else is part of this tangled web of corruption? Who else has slipped under the radar, operating unchecked, using their positions to further their own interests? As the media picks up the story, the judiciary finds itself under a microscope. Investigations are launched, inquiries are made, and what was once a quiet, protected world of legal power is now being exposed to the harsh light of public scrutiny. The arrest of one judge has become the catalyst for a broader movement, one that could change the face of the legal system forever. The question remains, how many more will fall? With Judge Harrington now in cuffs, the weight in the courtroom lifted, and Tiger Woods stood from his seat. The world outside awaited him. But Tiger wasn't in any rush. He had just witnessed the collapse of one man's empire of corruption, but he knew this moment was just the beginning. He glanced back at Pam Bondi, who was surrounded by reporters and admirers. She had fought for justice when others might have backed down. They shared a brief, silent look, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Her work was done, but for Tiger the journey had just started. As he walked out of the courtroom, his steps were steady, purposeful. This moment, this victory, wasn't just about him, it was about something much larger. He knew the consequences of what had just unfolded would reach far beyond his personal battles. It wasn't just about a corrupt judge being held accountable, it was about setting a precedent, about standing up to injustice in all its forms. Tiger had always been a fighter, but today he was more than just a man on a golf course. Today, he had become part of something bigger, something that could change the system. As he exited the courtroom and stepped into the unknown, Tiger knew that his next move would shape his future, and for the first time in a long time, he felt ready for whatever came next. This story was intense, but the one waiting for you on the right? It's even more insane. Click it now. You won't believe what happens next.